number 10 spot we have Jacek Jaworek. This is a man who's on the run because of the horrible crimes he committed in July of last year. He took the lives of 3 people who were a part of his own family. One of the family members was able to escape this horrific nightmare and was able to make it safely to the neighbor's house where they could call the authorities for help. Since these horrific crimes, he has gone missing and no one is sure of his whereabouts. Right now it is speculated that he likely escaped from Poland where the crimes took place, but his exact whereabouts remain quite the mystery. In our number 9 spot today we have the River City Ripper. One of the most terrifying things that exists are serial killers who are still on the loose, especially when you find out that they've been recently active. This serial killer is wanted in connection to 4 different incidents that occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, 3 of which were fatal. These horrific crimes took place between August of 2020 and April of 2021, and despite one of the victims thankfully surviving the attack and being able to provide a description of the assailant, there is still very little to go on in terms of being able to identify this horrible human. The FBI was contacted shortly after the survivor was able to give a testimony to authorities, and their behavioral analysis team created a profile of this unidentified killer. These crimes are terrible any way you spin them, but one of the most terrifying parts is that they were all just completely random acts of violence that occurred just unprovoked. The case has gained quite a bit of attention, but still, the monster remains at large. In our number 8 spot today we have Ruja Ignatova. This woman is a convicted fraudster who has been on the run since 2017 after she disappeared when she was found out to be the founder of a Ponzi scheme. The scam, known as OneCoin, which was a scam that was surrounding cryptocurrency, has been referred to as one of the biggest scams in history. US prosecutors have claimed that the scheme was so huge it brought in approximately $4 billion worldwide. Ruja had impeccable timing as she disappeared right at the time that there was a secret US warrant being filed for her arrest. Despite being on the run since 2017, in 2019 she was charged in absentia by US authorities for wire fraud, securities fraud, as well as money laundering. This lady is living the real life Ozark. It's absolutely insane. This case truly is something you'd expect to see on TV, but she's just living it. Despite the years it's been, international authorities are still doing their best to find out where she has been hiding, and this includes raids that have happened just this year. In our number 7 spot today we have the vending machine killer. Okay, so for this one we have to know that apparently there are a lot of vending machines in Japan. Like, it's said that there's one for every 23 people. It's a lot of vending machines. So in 1985 in Hiroshima, there were 12 people who passed away and 35 people who were seriously injured from being poisoned with a chemical herbicide. When the string of poisonings were investigated, authorities realized that they had one thing in common, and that was the fact that they had all had the same drink shortly before falling ill. So around the time of this whole thing, there was a company that had launched a marketing campaign where they gave a free drink with every purchase made from a vending machine. When people didn't want their free drink, they would leave it on top of the vending machine for the next person who came along, which is super nice and thoughtful and kind, and of course that means that some horrible person out there had to ruin it for everyone. So, as it turns out, someone was taking these drinks, lacing them with poison, and then leaving them on top of the machines for some random stranger to come around, drink it, and then be sick or unfortunately pass away. It is almost impossible for authorities to be able to track down whoever was doing this, because you have to narrow down where the person picked up the drink, and in 1985 there weren't as many CCTV cameras as there are now. So unfortunately, whoever was responsible for a mass poisoning of strangers is still out there somewhere. In our number 6 spot today we have Jan Marsalek. Jan is said to be a white-collar criminal who fled and went into hiding in June 2020 after the Wirecard scandal, as he was the COO of the company. If you're unfamiliar, Wirecard was a German payment processing firm that had years and years of allegations of malpractice against them. The entire thing really came to a peak in 2019 when the Financial Times published some of the investigations into the complaints as well as internal documents. In the end, in 2020, Wirecard filed for insolvency after it was realized that 1.9 billion euros were missing. If anyone finds that missing $1.9 billion, my DMs are wide open. It is believed that Jan is one of the main culprits in the entire scandal, and to be fair, fleeing the country doesn't really make you look very innocent. It is believed that he may be located in Russia now, but since August of 2020, Interpol has issued a red notice for him, which requests that worldwide law enforcement be on the lookout for him in order to arrest him, where he can then be extradited. In our number 5 spot today we have Bible John. John. This is the name used in reference to an unidentified serial killer who was responsible for Scotland's largest manhunt. All three of his victims were young brunette women between the ages of 25 to 32, and they had all met him at the Barrel and Ballroom, which was a dance and music venue in Glasgow. Despite this important information, he has never been able to be identified. This was actually the first time in Scotland in which the Crown Office authorized the publication of a composite drawing of the man who was suspected of the crimes. The reason he is called Bible John is said to be because he apparently repeatedly quoted the Bible, which is, I don't know, just really creepy. Most of the key information in the investigation came from one of the victim's sisters, Jean Langford, who had been in the same taxi as her sister and the suspected killer on the night he took her life. She was able to give a description of the man and was able to give information that helped authorities create a profile of him. Despite her incredibly helpful information, he was never able to be caught, and Jean passed away in 2010. While Bible John might have also passed away by now, I still hope that one day authorities can figure out who he was. In our number 4 spot today, we have Monica Witt. Monica is a former United States Air Force technical sergeant as well as a defense contractor who has been on the run since 2018. Despite her high-ranking position and high security clearance, she is on the run because she defected to Iran in 2013. It is said that from 2013 up until she was found out that she was using her position in order to spy on the United States and relay that information back to the group she was working for. She used different fake Facebook accounts, and it is said that the information she gave included the classified true name and counterintelligence activities of a US intelligence operative. This is of course a problem regardless of how important this operation was, but it is said that this information she shared had the potential to cause serious damage to the United States national security. It is an absolutely wild story, and Monica is still out there on the run, hiding from the consequences of her betrayal and espionage. In our number 3 spot today, we have John Pyle. This horrible human isn't an undercover spy or insane fraudster. He is just a monster who committed certain crimes that are unfortunately a little more common than any of us would like to know. Because of the nature of his crimes, I can't talk about them here in this video, but let's just say that he is definitely one of the worst kinds of criminals out there. On June 24th, 2016, authorities searched his home after receiving 3 tips relating to his crimes. The amount of and the severity of the incriminating evidence they found during this search ended up landing him charged with 30 different second-degree felonies, which could bring a sentence of 450 years in prison. He was arrested the same day and posted a bail bond of $90,000. Why he was able to get bail, I'll never know. And he also had to surrender his passport. Flash forward 16 months to October 23rd, 2017, and of course, this guy doesn't show up for his hearing, and thus we have a fugitive on the run. Even though he gave up his passport, it is said that he was still somehow able to board a Carnival cruise ship that was bound for Cozumel, Mexico. He got off the ship when it arrived and never reboarded. Despite efforts from international authorities as well as bounty hunters, he has still yet to be located. The last time he was seen was in February of 2018 in Nuevo Leon. In our number 2 spot today, we have Alejandro Castillo. Alejandro is an American man who was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list in October of 2017. He was added to the list after disappearing after taking the life of a woman named Sandy Lai Lee. Sandy was a co-worker of his, and it is said that the two might have briefly dated. Basically, apparently, she had lent him some money that he had never repaid. On August 9th, 2016, Alejandro texted Sandy saying that he would like to repay her, and they agreed to meet at a quick trip. Alejandro was driven to this meeting by Amaya Feaster, who is said to be his new girlfriend. It is believed that once at the meeting, instead of repaying her, Alejandro forced Sandy to take out all of the money from her bank account, which is said to have been about $1,000. After this, the pair drove Sandy to a wooded area where it is said that he then took her life. After this, the pair fled the scene of the crime and drove from North Carolina to Phoenix, Arizona. They then ended up fleeing into Mexico from there. While Amaya turned herself into authorities on October 20th, 2016, Alejandro remains at large and on the run. Despite the years it's been, I hope that one day he is found so he can be brought to justice for this horrible, senseless crime. In our number 1 spot today, we have Bhadrash Kumar Patel. This is a man who, in 2015, was in the United States in Hanover, Maryland, with his wife Palak. It is said that the pair were traveling to visit relatives and that they had both taken a job at a local Dunkin' Donuts that was owned by one of their family members. It was at this location that on April 12th, 2015, 2015, it is said that he took the life of his wife. Surveillance footage shows the two of them walking together in the kitchen around 9:30 p.m. that day before they disappear out of view behind some racks that were in the kitchen. Shortly after this, he reappears alone, turns the oven off, and leaves. Authorities believe that this all may have been over an argument where one of the couple wanted to return to India while the other wanted to stay in the United States. After customers of the store began getting worried when no one came to take their order, they thankfully decided to approach a nearby police officer. The officer went to investigate, and that is when he sadly found her body. The last sighting of him was on April 13th at around 10 a.m. at Newark Penn Station in New Jersey. He had taken a hotel shuttle there and has never been seen since. There is currently a $100,000 reward for information that leads to his whereabouts. It truly is an unimaginable horror, and I hope that this monster is one day brought to justice.
Off at number 10 is Robert William Fisher. Added to the FBI's most wanted fugitives list back in 2002, in a plot twist turn of events, Fisher used to be a firefighter, a surgical technician, and even joined the Navy for a bit. All jobs a fugitive should definitely not have. To paint a picture of what he was like, to teach his kids how to swim, he threw them out of a boat, and the one time his wife Mary spoke up back to him, he hosed her down. His parents divorced growing up, and he claimed he would contemplate suicide if Mary ever divorced him, which we know was her plan. In April 2001, neighbors heard the Fishers loudly arguing at around 10:30 p.m. 15 minutes later, cameras placed Robert at an ATM taking out money using Mary's car. At 8:42 a.m., their house exploded and the flames are 20 feet high. This is not a joke. The gas line that led to the house's furnace was pulled, so there was accumulating gas in the house that Fisher used to set the house ablaze. It's believed he only set the house on fire to try and conceal his crimes, which were killing his wife and her children. He shot Mary in the back of the head and slashed the kids' throats. When the fire was put out, it was clear Fisher had disappeared, and immediately he became the only person of interest in the case. 2 weeks later, Mary's car and their dog were found near Tonto National Forest, so initially they thought he may have been hiding out in the caves and had either killed himself or died from the low oxygen levels, but sightings of him over the years prove he's still alive and well, unfortunately. Coming in at number 9 is Victor Manuel GERENA. This guy is a huge deal because as of April 2010, he's been on the fugitive list longer than anyone else. Victor was an EPB agent, which translates to the Boricua People's Army, a Puerto Rican guerrilla organization that campaigned for Puerto Rico's independence from the US. Victor was put on the FBI's most wanted list for his involvement in the 1983 Aguila Blanca armed robbery. September 12th started off as normal. Victor dropped his girlfriend off at Hartford City Hall to pick up their marriage license and then went to work at Wells Fargo. The company stored huge amounts of money at their depot, and Victor was the trusted second in command that had most of the vault's keys. On the day, employees were moving a lot of cash in vans, and at some point while doing this, Victor pulled a gun on his manager and co-worker before handcuffing them both. To try and disable them further, he injected them with water and aspirin, which actually did nothing. He then apologized before moving around $7 million from the vaults. Eventually, his co-workers got out of the bonds and called the police, but Victor had already handed over the money to the EPB and headed to Boston and then New York and finally Cuba. At the time, this was the biggest cash robbery in US history, and any information on Victor was worth $1 million. He was removed from the most wanted list in 2016 after being on it for 32 years and was presumed dead, but he's only 62. I doubt he's dead, to be honest. Come on, he's rich and old. I'm sure he has people to make him survive. At number 8, we have Bhadresh Kumar Chetanbhai Patel. This man is currently in the FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitive list, and I reckon anyone who's on this list deserves to be there. Back in April of 2015, Patel and his new wife Palak were working a night shift at a Dunkin' Donuts in Hanover, Maryland. Surveillance footage placed the couple in the kitchen at 9:30 p.m. and then they disappear behind some racks. A few moments later, Patel comes out without Palak, turns off the oven, and leaves for the night. It wasn't until later that night Palak's body was found beaten and stabbed to death. Apparently he had used a giant kitchen knife. Authorities speculate that they must have gotten into an argument about Patel wanting to stay in America and Palak wanting to go back to India. Keep in mind the store wasn't closed when he left, and customers grew confused as to why no staff was there. A nearby police officer noticed and went inside and finally found her body. That gave Patel a total of 1 hour before he was identified as a suspect, meaning he had time to escape. He fled on foot, getting some stuff from his apartment before taking a cab to an airport hotel hotel, and last being seen at Newark Penn Station. There's currently a $100,000 reward for any info about him. Filling a number 7 slot is Glenn Stewart Godwin. Back in the early 80s, Glenn was in Palm Springs working as a freelance mechanic, tool salesman, and construction worker. For some reason, Glenn and his roommate Frank decide to rob their pilot drug dealer friend Kim Robert LaValle. They lured him back to their apartment where Frank held him while Glenn attacked him and tried to strangle him. When that didn't work, he stabbed him 26 times and the two loaded the body into a truck and headed for the desert. They strapped explosives to his body and left it in the truck and blew it up, hoping to destroy any and all evidence, but by August, residents near the area found the truck along with the remains of a body. After identifying the body, police charged Glenn while Frank testified against him. After being transferred from his first prison, Glenn was at Folsom State Prison, a maximum security prison where tools had somehow been smuggled in for him to help him escape. By June of 1987, he had escaped with the help of an outside accomplice. He was then arrested in Mexico but ended up killing a member of the Mexican drug cartel in prison, knowing it would delay his extradition. He used that to escape again, and he is still a free man as we speak. Damn you, Glenn! Now at number 6 is Arnoldo Jimenez. A lover spat is really the worst, especially when you've literally just gotten married. Sometimes they end well, and sometimes they end in murder. You guess how this one went. On May 11, 2012, Arnoldo got married to, and I don't know how to say her name, either Estrella Carrera or Estrella Carrera. Either way, the couple had one kid together, and Carrera had a son from a previous partner. That night, after the wedding festivities, the couple had dinner with friends and family, then went to a nightclub and got home at around 4 AM. On the way home though, something happened between the two that brought out the demon in Arnoldo. He stabbed his wife multiple times in his car, then dragged her bloody body to their apartment and dumped her body in the bathtub. The next day, after Estrella failed to pick up the kids and with no word from Arnoldo, family members called the police, who found her body the next day, and Arnoldo was nowhere to be found. His phone was tracked to Chicago, then Memphis, Arkansas, and then Hidalgo, Mexico. Later that year, authorities arrested his brother Humberto due to drug charges and found Arnoldo's car on his person with blood inside, confirming their theory. It's believed he's still hiding somewhere in Mexico. How can someone kill their partner not even 12 hours after marrying them? Like, what the hell is that? Coming in at number 5 is Jason Derek Brown. This California native speaks fluent French, served as a mission for the Church of Latter-day Saints, and also has a master's degree. He's also considered armed and extremely dangerous, which is really far more interesting than the facts I said previously. Jason had been running check and bank fraud scams for years and was tens of thousands of dollars in debt. In November of 2004, he bought a pistol and took a firearms instruction course for his upcoming crime, of course. At the time, Jason was living at a hotel in Ahwatukee near an AMC movie theater. On the 29th, an armored car guard came by with the weekend deposits outside the theater. At 10 AM, a hooded gunman shot the guard driving 5 times in the head. He then stole a bag containing $56,000 and fled on bike. The bicycle was later found and the prints matched Jason, who had to be fingerprinted during the firearms course. An arrest warrant was put out for him for armed burglary and first-degree murder, but Jason had already fled to Nevada. Because of his surfer dude appearance, the FBI got more tips about him than any other fugitive, and the latest sighting was in Salt Lake City. At number 4 is Alejandro Castillo. Fluent in English and Spanish, the Arizona local worked at a Show Mars restaurant located in Charlotte, North Carolina. In 2016, he got close with his co-worker, 23-year-old Truck Kwan Lai Lee, who went by the name Sandy. The two dated for a while, during which Sandy loaned him some money that he hadn't repaid. On the 9th of August of that year, Alejandro told her to meet him at Quick Trip so he could pay her back. His girlfriend Amia picked him up and drove him there, and instead of repaying her, he made Sandy take out $1,000 from an ATM while he had a gun to her head. After bankrupting her, the two drove Sandy to a wooded area before shooting her in the head and dumping her body in a ravine. The two fled to Phoenix and abandoned the car. Whilst back in Charlotte, Sandy was reported missing, and so were the other two. They called their families claiming they were safe but didn't know where they were, and their families thought they were being held captive. Nah, your kids are just murderers. Eventually, after they found Sandy's body, Alejandro was charged with first-degree murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Amia turned herself in October and was arrested for accessory felony murder and larceny. She told authorities where they had been staying, but Alejandro had already disappeared. Still at large somewhere until this day. Filling a number 3 slot is Jorge Lopez Perez, aka El Chuta. Perez is a very high-ranking member of Los Zetas, the most dangerous Mexican drug cartel in the world. Not only do they traffic drugs, the crime syndicate also do sex trafficking and gun-running rackets. You do not want to mess with this cartel. Their tactics include things like beheadings, torture, and they will assassinate or kidnap you without hesitation. Perez is especially dangerous because before he joined the cartel, he was in the Mexican army. The man specialized in explosives, martial arts, and guerrilla warfare tactics. He's extremely dangerous, do not get me wrong. He deserted the military in 1981 and joined the Juarez cartel, and from then till 2003 he worked with gangs and independently as a drug trafficker before joining Los Zetas. He knew a lot of the members already from his military days and was considered one of the group's founding members. Perez took care of drug trafficking in Cancun, and by 2009, after being cited as the regional leader of the group, Mexican authorities listed him as one of their leading fugitives. He's one of the only fugitives from the early Zetas generation who is still out there somewhere uncaught. Or, you know, not dead. Now at number 2 is Dawood Ibrahim. Wanted since 1994, this Indian drug dealer and mobster is the most wanted by India, and they've offered $25 million for him. He started off with petty crimes like fraud and robbery, but he later joined the gang of a local don. By the 70s, he started his own gang with his brother and dubbed it the D Company. After killing Samad Khan, he fled to Dubai but still ran D Company, which was mostly involved in real estate, gold smuggling, drug trafficking, and extortion. By the 90s, his gang had 5,000 members in it and was bringing in hundreds of millions in revenue. The US named him a global terrorist after his believed involvement in the 1993 Bombay bombings, which killed 317 people and injured 1,400 others. After the attacks, he fled Dubai and hid in Karachi, and it's believed he's still there. The man knew Osama bin Laden. It was a Taliban that ensured his safe travels to Afghanistan in the 90s, and his gang uses Al-Qaeda's drug smuggling routes. I mean, the groups were close. Let's be real. He's committed so many crimes I've honestly lost count, but the bastard is good at hiding, I will give him that. And finally, at number 1 is Joseph Kony. Does that ring a bell? Kony 2012? Stop Kony 2012? That documentary that came out and went viral and made Joseph Kony a household name. Some call him a terrorist, others a prophet. Whatever he is, he's escaped capture for over 2 decades now. In 2005, the ICC issued an arrest warrant for Kony on 12 accounts of crimes against humanity and 21 war crimes. As one of the leaders of the Lord's Resistance Army, he abducted, mutilated, killed, and brutalized civilians in northern Uganda. And even more horrifically, the army is known for kidnapping children and using them as sex slaves or soldiers. The LRA were known to cut off people's limbs or parts of their face in the 90s, which terrified hundreds of thousands, causing them to flee. He references the Bible to explain why it's necessary to kill his own people, and was eventually forced out of South Sudan, Congo, and even the Central African Republic. He's still at large somewhere, but since the LRA has shrunk to about 100 soldiers, he's no longer deemed a security threat to Uganda. Even then, this man is extremely dangerous. Somebody catch him, please. So for number 10 is Ricardo Ash. This guy has impressive qualifications. He's a gynecologist, obstetrician, endocrinologist, and a fugitive. He pioneered GIFT, aka gamete intrafallopian transfer, which is not something you'd think a criminal could be capable of doing. However, in 1995, Ricardo and his 2 partners were accused of taking women's eggs without their consent and using it for other patients so they could conceive. 15 children were born from the misuse of these eggs, but he wasn't arrested since technically this wasn't a crime. Worried he could somehow end up in jail, Ricardo sold his properties and fled to Mexico and was arrested in Argentina in 2004. An extradition request for him was denied and he fled back to Mexico, where he was rearrested in 2010. He was set for parole in 2011 and was released, but the US still wanted to extradite him, yet he's nowhere to be found. It's been 9 years, no one knows where the hell Ricardo is. And he stole some people's eggs, so he needs to get arrested. Coming in at number 9 is Vasilis Paliaukostas. From the name you can probably guess that Vasilis is Greek and was accused of being the mastermind behind kidnapping industrialist Yorios Milonas. Greek names are very hard, you guys, just give me a break. The ransom paid for him was eventually traced back to Vasilis, making him the prime and only suspect. Then in 2000, he was convicted for kidnapping the CEO of Haitoglu Bros back in 1995 and sentenced to 25 years in jail. In June of 2006, two of his accomplices hired a sightseeing helicopter and then hijacked it and forced the pilot to fly to the prison at gunpoint. Guards thought the helicopter were prison inspectors and let the prisoners be flown to a cemetery next to the jail where they all fled, Vasilis included. He was recaptured in 2008 but escaped yet again a year later by helicopter again. A rope ladder was thrown down for him and his cellmate as the helicopter hovered above the jail courtyard. Guards tried firing at the lady in the helicopter, but she had a damn automatic rifle, so they obviously lost. The helicopter was found abandoned in a suburb in Athens with the pilot bound and gagged. There's currently a €1 million bounty placed on any information about Vasilis' whereabouts. Honestly, pat on the back for me for trying to pronounce these Greek names. They all are complicated as hell. At number 8, we have Omid Tavili. Iranian-Canadian Omid is a gangster who was the kingpin of a huge crime family in Canada. The RCMP revealed he was arrested back in 2000 for having 3 kilograms of cocaine on him, but was found not guilty. He then ran a scam telemarketing business aimed at Americans and ended up stealing $3 million, mostly from old people that just fell for the scam. He was arrested in British Columbia in 2003 after the US District Court issued a federal arrest warrant for him. 2 years later, he realized $300,000 of his drug money had gone missing and guessed it was his career that had taken it and fled. So to enact revenge, he kidnapped the dude's brother-in-law, sexually assaulted him, and then interrogated him before getting arrested himself. In 2007, the BC Supreme Court ordered him to be extradited to the US, but that didn't scare Omid since Amandeep Singh was his lawyer. The criminal and extradition lawyer that literally represents all these controversial criminals like Rakesh Saxena. Like, you know he's getting a lot of money for defending these criminals, but whatever. Either way, they filed for an appeal, and while waiting for the result, Omid disguised himself as janitor Edwin Teesney and escaped from jail. No one knows where he is today. Filling at number 7 slot is Alfred Stark. At 92 years old, this man committed heinous war crimes when he was a Nazi in the 40s. Anyway, he was accused of ordering the execution of 117 Italian prisoners of war. This was part of the slaughter of nearly 9,500 officers after the Germany-Italy alliance went to shit. The military court of Rome literally indicted him in 2012 and sentenced him to life in prison, but Germany still refuses to extradite him to Italy to serve his sentence. I've heard about a lot of Nazis that fled to South America and are just living there under new names, but this dude is literally sat at home in Germany hiding in plain sight because he knows the government won't do shit. Like, this man committed war crimes. Those are crimes against humanity and he has to be punished for them. Now at number 6 is John Ruffo. Now this guy was the president of CCS, which is an IBM equipment reseller, before he went into hiding, so I mean, the man had moolah. Either way, in 1992 he met with his friend Edward GERENA, who had just been laid off from Philip Morris USA, and he told John about Project Star. It involved pitching a fake project to various bank executives claiming they were working on a top secret operation to develop smokeless cigarettes on behalf of Philip Morris. Newsflash, they're called vapes. Either way, John had a company, so it was very easy to forge everything they needed, and because Edward used to work with Philip, they never actually had to contact him. It was all going to plan until 96 when an employee noticed something off in one of the documents. He contacted Philip, then the FBI, and then everything went tits up. The duo had managed to get $350 million, but the FBI couldn't locate 21 million of it, so either way, where did it go? Edward was arrested and John went on the run. He didn't turn himself in and was last seen taking money out of an ATM before never being seen again. His car was found abandoned at JFK Airport, and he's currently still in hiding. $25,000 is being offered for any information on him, and he's actually in the US Marshals 15 Most Wanted list. Coming in at number 5 is Ikhlaq Fakir Muhammad Sheikh. The Indian 29-year-old murderer has been in hiding since 2006. Godwin Kovinu was an archaeologist that was a part of the Afar expedition undertaken in Ethiopia that led to the discovery of the skeleton Lucy. She was working at the Nepal Research Center and had moved there in 1984. For some reason, and no one knows why, I couldn't figure out why or find out why, but Ikhlaq stabbed her to death before beheading her. She's an archaeologist, what did she do? Bund Garden police found her head within 7 hours of the murder and arrested him. The police then gave him 2 weeks parole to try and care for his sick wife, but that was the last time he was seen. They're assuming he ran off with his wife and mum and is currently still in hiding. I just don't get what possessed him to do that. And number 4 is Gilbert Winter. British British-born Gilbert worked as a jeweler by day and enforcer for the Addams family crime syndicate by night. Who knew a jeweler's life could be that dangerous? Nobody. Now, the Addams family, aka the Clerkenwell Crime Syndicate, is an Irish criminal organisation and is one of the most powerful ones in the UK. They're worth £200 million and have been linked to nearly 30 murders. In 1994, Gilbert and fellow enforcer Ray Barton ended up killing a drug dealer called Claude Mosley with a samurai sword, which, I mean, fashionable, I have to say. They offed Claude because he was pocketing money from a drug operation run by the Addams family, and that didn't go down well with them. Gilbert was put on trial for the murder, but since no one would testify, the case was dropped. Fast forward to March 1998, Gilbert vanishes into thin air. He was involved in a weed deal in which £800,000 went missing, so either he ran off with the money or the gang killed him. Saul Nahom, the family's financial advisor who was also part of that deal, was shot months later, so people think Gilbert disappeared so the family wouldn't kill him. Regardless, he's still a murderer and he's still wanted. Filling at number 3 slot is ACHEMEZ GOCHIYAYEV. This guy used to serve in the Russian Strategic Rocket Forces and had been accused of being involved in the Russian apartment bombings of 1999 that killed nearly 300 people and kickstarted the Second Chechen War. 4 bombings took place between September 4th and 9th and targeted 4 apartment blocks. The bombs were later found on grounds that ACHEMEZ rented with 2 other people who founded his company. After the first 2 bombs went off, he actually called the police and warned them, so maybe he had had a change of heart midway. According to the Federal Security Service of Russia, he was given $500,000 from warlord Ibn al-Khattab for doing the deed. As the case was further investigated, ACHEMEZ fled to Georgia and then Turkey. He was last seen in March of 2002 and is still a fugitive in hiding that is wanted for terrorism. Now at number 2 is Pedro Alonso Lopez. Known as the Monster of the Andes, Pedro is a serial killer who took the lives of many. Growing up, his mother worked as a prostitute, which had adverse effects on him. When he was 8, he was caught touching his younger sister, which caused him to get kicked out of his home. He then fled to Colombia, where a man took him in and repeatedly sodomized him, and the abuse continued even from other males after that. At 18 years old, he started stealing cars for a living and was soon caught and arrested. Apparently, while he was in jail, he was gang and that left him so angry he killed all those involved while he was still in jail. When he got out though, he started killing girls in Peru, and by 1978 he had murdered over 100 people. The police had him but released him, and so he moved to Ecuador, killing up to 3 girls a week. By 1980 he was arrested in an abduction gone wrong and confessed to killing 103 girls, but was released 8 years later for good behavior. Over the next 15 years he was arrested, released, and re-arrested before getting free in 98. He's currently still wanted for killing and over 300 girls in Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador. And finally, at number 1 is Xavier Dupont de Legon. I put this one on the list because unsolved mysteries inspired me, to be honest, and the case is very interesting. So back in April of 2011, the family's neighbor got suspicious when the Legons' home was boarded up and decided to call the police. The family was nowhere to be found until a letter came saying they had fled to the US since the parents were DEA agents. That was obviously fake, and after several police visits to the house, the bodies of the wife Agnes, the 4 kids, and the 2 dogs were all found buried in their garden. Xavier's body was not there, and neither was his car. So already we have prime suspect number 1, the dad. Now everyone had been shot by a rifle that Xavier had inherited from his dad 3 weeks prior. Apparently he was under crippling debt and had no money left, and as a count, he didn't want his children or the public to know the family was ruined. He also didn't want his kids to suffer any hardships either, so apparently he thought killing them was the best thing to do. After he fled, he didn't even hide. He was still using his credit card at places and waved at a security camera in southeastern France before taking off with his rifle and leaving his car. If he did commit suicide, the body was never found, and if he fled, well, he's still wanted. Number 10 is Sharon Kin. Known as La Pistolera in Mexico, Sharon Kin, also known as Jeanette Pugliese, is the subject of the longest current outstanding arrest warrant for murder in Kansas City history. She actually has one of the longest outstanding felony warrants in history, so I mean, firstly, congrats on your achievements, Sharon. Psych! Now Sharon married James Kin back in 1956 after she faked her own pregnancy. By 1960 he was contemplating divorce due to her infidelity and spending habits. March 19th, 1960, Sharon heard a gunshot coming from James's bedroom, and she found her 2-year-old daughter Dana with a gun in her hand and James bleeding from a gunshot wound on the back of his head. He was dead before the ambulance even got there. Now James let Dana play with his guns often, and the death was ruled an accident. The next death 5th was Patricia Jones, wife to Walter Jones Jr., who was having an affair with Sharon. Now Sharon told him she was pregnant in hopes that he would divorce Patricia, but instead he ended their affair. Later that day, Sharon called Patricia telling her Walter was having an affair with her sister and that she wanted to talk about it. She was never seen alive again, and her body was found that night a mile out of town. She had been shot 4 times. Sharon was trials for both murders, and in fact there were 4 trials for James's murder. Now before the 4th one, she was free on bond and fled to Mexico with her lover. There she killed another man in apparent self-defense, which nobody believed. Come on Sharon, you've killed 2 people now 3. You think the 3rd one is an accident? Hell no. Sharon was sentenced to 13 years in prison but escaped from Iztapalapa prison in December of 1969. She had bribed the guards to look the other way while she escaped, and so a manhunt ensued, and more than 50 years later she still hasn't been found. Many people think she's dead. Honestly, she's probably not. Coming in at number 9 is Antonio Angeles. The Brazilian Spanish criminal grew up in Brazil and was known as a violent person who often beat up his mother. Antonio moved to Spain where he continued to commit crimes like robbery, mugging and drug trafficking before finally being involved in the Alcazar girls. On November 13th, 1992, Antonio went for a drive with his friend when they saw 3 girls hitchhiking to a party that a high school was holding at a club. The boys picked them up and passed the venue, after which the girls started screaming because something was wrong. He hit them all with the butt of his gun before tying them all up and taking them to a secluded location. There, all the girls were raped and then forced to get into a pit. Antonio then shot and buried them, and their bodies were found in January the following year. The beekeepers who found the bodies found Antonio's friend's glove and a social security slip from Antonio's brother. Antonio was on the run and was last seen somewhere in Lisbon that year. After that, he either boarded a boat going to Ireland and jumped off of it, therefore drowning and dying, or he went back to Brazil. We have no clue. At number 8 we have Elizabeth Ann Duke. I was like, I really need to try and find some women to put on these lists because it's all men. Gender equality, hello. Now Elizabeth was part of a Weatherman splinter group called the May 19th Communist Organization. The group claimed credit for a lot of bombings that damaged US government buildings, including the 83 bombing of the US Capitol building. The attack was motivated by the US military's involvement in Grenada and Lebanon that the group was very opposed to. No one was killed or injured, and the damages added up to around $640,000. Elizabeth was arrested in May of 1985 and was indicted on falsification, conspiracy, and weapons charges. 2 months later, she was released on bail and went missing in October, never to be seen again. There's a $50,000 reward for information regarding her whereabouts, but based on the fact that this is part 5 of these lists, you're not gonna find them. Filling at number 7 slot is Frank Matthews, aka Black Caesar, Pee Wee, Mark the Fourth. This guy really had a lot of A-listers. Evidently he thought he was a cool guy. Now Frank was a drug trafficker that sold a lot of cocaine and heroin throughout the east coast of the US from the mid-60s to the early 70s. For some backstory, he led a chicken stealing gang when he was 14 and then went to juvie for assaulting a farmer who caught him in the act. He was released after a year and moved to Philadelphia, where he made his drug connections with members of the Black Mafia. By the 70s, Frank's drug organization was handling multi-million dollars of heroin. He was in charge of 2 huge drug mills in New York, both of which were very heavily guarded. The DEA had been onto him for a while, and with clashes with the Black Mafia, now was the time to catch him. Easter Sunday 1972, the Black Mafia killed Frank's main dealer in Philadelphia. He was charged in Florida for trying to sell 40 pounds of coke and was arrested in January for conspiracy to distribute and tax evasion. He was scheduled to appear in court in July, but apparently took $20 million and fled the country with his girlfriend, leaving his wife and kids behind. I really wonder how that relationship panned out. It probably didn't. He probably killed her too. Really? You'd run away with your girlfriend? Would you not run away with your wife and kids? Surely that means more. Now at number 6 is Leo Burt. On the 24th of August 1970, Sterling Hall, a building on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, was bombed by 4 men, one of which was Leo Burt. The bombings were carried out in retaliation and protest against the university's research connection with the US military. Floors 2 to 4 in that building were housing the Army Mathematics Research Center for the Vietnam War. And we know how how polarizing the opinions on the Vietnam War were in America at the time, so I mean, this is no surprise to anyone. The four bombers dubbed themselves the New Year's Gang and had been involved in several anti-war acts before the bombing, so this was really no surprise. The incident killed Robert Fastnacht, a PhD researcher, and injured 3 others. Leo was involved in not only making the bomb, but planting it as well. As soon as it was done, Leo and the others fled to Canada as the FBI tracked them. The last time anyone heard from him was on the 30th of August as he and David fled their apartment as police closed in on them. He was indicted for destruction of government property, sabotage, and conspiracy, and is currently still at large. 50 years later, there have been sightings in St. Catharines, Ontario, Lakewood, Washington, but nothing came up. Where are you at, Leo? Coming in at number 5 is Frank Blackhorse. This man's background is extremely debatable. Some say he's a member of the Cherokee Nation, whereas others say he's not even Indian. The FBI think he's Italian Jewish and born in Cleveland, whereas Frank said himself that he was born in Cherokee, North Carolina. Either way, he was part of the Wounded Knee occupation, where followers of the American Indian movement took over and occupied the city of Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. The group wasn't happy with the leadership of Chairman Richard Wilson, and so they decided to do something about it. FBI agents responded to the scene and Agent Curtis Fitzgerald was shot in the wrist. No one knows who fired the bullet, but Blackhorse was arrested and charged with the shooting. Come on man, you got shot in the wrist, you didn't die. Let it go. He was released on a cash bond and was scheduled to appear at trial in August of 1974, but never showed up. He was then named a suspect in a shootout that occurred at Jumping Bull compound that resulted in 2 dead FBI agents. Frank made it on the FBI's most wanted list back in the 70s, and he was actually arrested by the RCMP in Hinton, Alberta. Some sources claim he was extradited to the US, some claim he wasn't, and others believe he was just allowed to roam Western Canada freely. No one knows where he is, but apparently he is the key to finding out who killed those 2 FBI agents. Well, he's not gonna help you now after you basically trialed him for shooting somebody's wrist and he didn't even do it. We don't know. We don't know. There's no evidence. And number 4 is Sukumara Kurup. This guy is one of the most wanted criminals in the state of Kerala. In 1984, he was accused of murdering film representative Chaco and has been in hiding ever since. Chaco was found strangled to death and his body had been burnt inside of a car. Kurup apparently committed the crime and killed the man just to fake his own death and claim Chaco's life insurance. That ended up being around $75,000, which was quite a lot of money at the time. He then fled abroad while 2 of his co-accused, his brother-in-law and driver, was sentenced to life in jail. Chaco's murder case is one of the longest standing cases in Kerala, and despite Sukumara's lookalikes popping up here and there, they still haven't managed to track him down. Dude, he ran away with $75,000, killed a man, and left his driver and brother-in-law to rot in jail. Do you really think this guy's gonna be showing up anytime soon in India? Nope. He's living his life in bloody Bali. Filling at number 3 slot is Arthur Lee Washington Jr. Former member of the Black Liberation Army, Arthur was added to the FBI's top 10 most wanted list in October of 1989 after trying to murder a New Jersey state trooper. In April of that year, state trooper Michael J. Clayton stopped a car that had an expired inspection sticker on it. The driver of the car was Arthur, who got out of the car when stopped and just kept walking away from the officer. He ignored all of Clayton's commands, and as he began to go after Arthur, the latter pulled out a gun and fired. He missed, and as Clayton returned the fire and reloaded, Arthur had escaped on foot. After searching his apartment, officers found 3 other weapons, and a federal arrest warrant came very quickly after that. He was kept on the FBI's list for 11 years before being replaced. He's still wanted, but most people believe he's dead because if he was alive, he'd be around 71 years old. So I don't get why you think he was dead. He's probably very much alive. 71? People are alive at that time. Now number 2 is Adam Emery. I honestly feel like this case was of a guy losing his shit over his car getting damaged, and it just went horribly wrong after that. Now back in August of 1990, Adam and his wife Elena were eating at a restaurant when his car was sideswiped by another car. Absolutely livid, he chased down the car and stabbed the driver to death, but turns out it was the wrong car. He ended up murdering 20-year-old Jason Bass and was put in jail for 8 weeks before being bailed out. 3 years later, he was awaiting his formal sentencing since he was convicted of second-degree murder and could have faced up to 25 years in prison. He disappeared along with his wife, and they both mailed suicide notes before their car was found near a bridge. Elena's skull was found at the bottom of the bridge that same day, but Adam's was not. He was declared legally dead in 2004, but investigators didn't buy it. He could have easily traveled somewhere after killing his wife. How do we know he didn't do that? People have reported seeing him in Connecticut, then in Florida, then France, and Italy, and last year the FBI actually said there's a huge chance of tracking him down in the next 5 years, so you're going down, Emery. And finally, at number 1 is Elmer Kyle Crawford. This guy did a number on everyone around him. Honestly, I feel bad for anybody who was around him. Vanishing Houdini act, legitimately. So back in July of 1970, Elmer was married to Therese, who was pregnant at the time, and the two already had 3 kids together. 2 weeks before the incidents took place, the family had drafted new wills, leaving a huge fortune to Crawford in case the family died. Don't you already know who the suspect is? Anytime people take out wills, someone's gonna get murdered. He then constructed his own electrocution device using a 15-meter electrical lead and alligator clips. He electrocuted Therese to death in her sleep and then killed and electrocuted the rest of his family. He then loaded all their bodies into his sedan and pushed the whole car off a cliff to try and frame his wife and make the whole thing look like a murder-suicide. Elmer has been missing ever since the murders and was last seen in Western Australia in 1994. There's a reward of $100,000 for any information about him, but to be honest, the guy is now 90 years old. He evaded the police his whole life and got away with it. This man will most likely die before ever stepping foot in jail. Like, if I was him and the police caught me, I would rather just drop dead then and there than be like, yeah, take me to jail. Nope. And that is it for today's video, guys. I will literally be so surprised if there's a part 6 to this. And watch me say this and me come back with a part 6. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. As always, I'm your host, Eamon Hassan, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!